The moment I saw it, my chest tightened. My hands trembled as I held the phone, scrolling through the comments pouring in beneath Mia's post. My name was plastered across the screen, her words painting me as a liar and a fraud for the world to see. Thousands of strangers had turned into a mob, feeding off her accusations without knowing the truth. I couldn't breathe. How could the woman I trusted, the woman I loved, do this to me? The video was there in full color. Mia sitting in our living room, eyes swollen with tears as she addressed her audience. "I never wanted to share this," she began, her voice cracking just enough to sell the performance. "But I can't stay silent anymore. My husband, Liam, he betrayed me in ways I can't even describe." I replayed the video, my heart pounding harder each time her words echoed in my ears. She had rehearsed it well, every pause, every tear designed to strike a nerve. And it worked. People believed her. They called me a monster. They demanded justice. My inbox flooded with threats. My workplace became a circus, and even my closest friends began to question me. But none of them knew the real story, yet. I threw my phone onto the counter, my jaw clenched so tightly it ached. I knew Mia had a flair for the dramatic, but this wasn't just a tantrum or a cry for attention. She wanted to ruin me, to tear down everything I'd built, brick by brick. And she was succeeding. I stared out the window, the world outside feeling both too far away and uncomfortably close. I had to act fast, but how? Confront her? Fight back publicly? Or wait for her next move? The questions swirled in my mind, each one heavier than the last. My head was spinning, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a smear campaign. It was a declaration of war. Before we continue, we noticed that over 80% of our viewers haven't subscribed to the channel. If you're enjoying this story and want to hear more like it, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you never miss an update. We'd also love to hear your thoughts, so don't forget to leave a comment below. But this battle didn't start here. To understand why Mia wanted to destroy me, you need to know the whole story. I'm not innocent in all this, not by a long shot. But what she did went beyond anything I could have ever imagined. We met 10 years ago at a company retreat. I was new, eager to prove myself in the marketing department, and Mia? She was magnetic. She had this confidence that pulled you in. Every room she entered seemed to bend around her. By the end of that weekend, I was hooked. I remember thinking she was the woman I'd been waiting for my entire life. Our first few years together were perfect, or at least, that's what I told myself. We built a life, traveled to places we only dreamed of, and spent nights talking about our future. But even back then, there were moments. Little things. Like how she always seemed to know where I was, even when I hadn't told her. Or how she turned small arguments into grand declarations, making herself the victim no matter what the issue was. I brushed it off as quirks, calling it passion. I ignored the small cracks in the foundation because I didn't want to believe they were there. The first major fracture came 3 years into our marriage. I was up for a promotion at work, a big one. I was working late nights, pouring everything I had into securing the position. But Mia didn't like that. She'd call me, accusing me of abandoning her. "You care more about your job than me," she'd say. At first, I tried to reassure her, but the more I explained, the angrier she got. It was as if she needed me to fail so I could stay within her grasp. That promotion slipped through my fingers, and while I told my colleagues it was a corporate decision, deep down, I knew Mia had played a part in it. That was the first time I started to see her for who she really was. Over the years, her behavior became more calculated. She'd forget to relay important messages or twist stories to make me look bad to our friends. And then there was the money. I found out she had been siphoning funds from our joint account to fuel her lifestyle, spa treatments, luxury handbags, weekend getaways with her friends. When I confronted her, she turned it around on me. "You make me feel so lonely. This is the only way I can cope." And like an idiot, I believed her. Jason, my best friend since college, was the only one who saw through her. He hated the way she spoke to me, the way she manipulated situations to make herself the center of attention. "Liam, you're blind," he'd say. "You think this is love, but it's control." I laughed it off, calling him cynical. But now I wonder if I should have listened sooner. The turning point came last year. We were at a dinner party, one of those events where couples flaunt their perfect lives. Mia had been drinking, and her tongue was loose. In front of everyone, she started airing out our private arguments, painting me as inattentive and selfish. I remember the heat rising in my face as our friends sat in uncomfortable silence. When we got home that night, I confronted her. "Why do you feel the need to humiliate me?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger. She just smirked and said, "Because it's the truth. And if you don't like it, maybe you should try being a better husband." From that point on, I started keeping my distance. I spent more time at work, avoided her friends, and kept my conversations with her superficial. She noticed the change, of course, but instead of trying to fix things, she doubled down. More public outbursts, more exaggerated stories to our mutual friends. It was like she thrived on tearing me down. And then, a month ago, I found something that changed everything. I was cleaning out the guest room when I stumbled across a stack of papers hidden in an old shoebox. Legal documents, bank statements, and one very familiar name, mine. She'd been preparing to file for divorce, accusing me of emotional abuse and infidelity. There were even fake text message conversations she created to back up her claims. My hands shook as I flipped through the papers. This wasn't just about her leaving me. This was a setup. She wanted to destroy me completely. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I watched. I started paying attention to her actions, noticing every lie, every manipulation. And then she posted that video, and everything became clear. This wasn't just a divorce. This was her final move to erase me entirely. But if she thought I was going to let her win, she was wrong. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions. How long had she been planning this? How many lies had she spun behind my back while smiling to my face? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the fake messages she'd crafted, the false narrative she was ready to sell to the world. The betrayal stung like nothing I'd ever felt before. But beyond the hurt, anger was growing. It wasn't enough for me to survive this. I needed to make her pay. The first thing I did was document everything. Every text, every email, every voicemail she'd left me over the years. I photographed the legal papers I found, capturing each forged conversation she had created. Then, I called Jason. If anyone could help me unravel her lies, it was him. "Liam, I told you," Jason said, his voice heavy with frustration. "She's been playing you from the start. You're just seeing it now because she's gotten sloppy." "It's more than that," I replied. "She's trying to destroy me. This isn't just about her wanting out of the marriage. This is a full-blown attack." Jason was silent for a moment before saying, "So, what's the plan?" The plan was to dig deeper. I started with her phone. She wasn't careful about where she left it, and when she went out for a run one morning, I finally had my chance. Her messages were damning. Conversations with her closest friend, Sophie, revealed just how far she was willing to go. "Don't worry," one text read. "By the time I'm done, everyone will see him for the fraud he is." Another message hinted at something even darker. "If he tries to fight me, I'll make sure he regrets it." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about her pride or anger. She wanted to ruin me completely, to strip away everything I had left. And she wasn't afraid to play dirty to get there. I started following her movements. Every time she left the house, I noted where she went, who she met, and how long she stayed. It didn't take long to realize she wasn't just meeting Sophie for coffee or running errands. There were other people involved, lawyers, colleagues, even a journalist who seemed all too interested in my story. She was laying the groundwork for something big, and I had to stay one step ahead. One night, while she was out late, I sat in the living room with my laptop. I opened the folder where I'd saved everything. Screenshots of her messages, records of her spending, and emails she'd sent to friends about her plans. My hands hovered over the keyboard as I debated my next move. Should I go public now? Expose her lies before she had the chance to spread them further? Or should I wait, gather more evidence, and make sure there was no way for her to spin the narrative in her favor? The decision was made for me when she came home that night, her face flushed and eyes bright with excitement. She didn't even notice me sitting there as she dropped her bag by the door and headed upstairs. Curiosity got the better of me, and I checked her bag. Inside was a folder with more legal documents, but this time, they weren't drafts. They were finalized. She had filed for divorce, citing emotional abuse and demanding half of everything I owned. My heart raced as I read through the pages, her accusations bold and unrelenting. She was going all in. The next morning, I confronted her. I placed the folder on the kitchen table and waited for her to come down. When she saw it, her face went pale, but she quickly recovered, crossing her arms and glaring at me. "You went through my things?" She snapped, her voice sharp. "You didn't give me much of a choice," I replied, my tone calm but firm. "You've been planning this for months, haven't you?" Her smirk returned, that infuriating expression she always wore when she thought she was in control. "What did you expect, Liam? You're not exactly husband of the year. I'm just making sure I get what I deserve." "Deserve?" I leaned forward, my voice low. "What you deserve is for the world to see you for who you really are." Her eyes narrowed. "And what are you going to do? Tell your little sob story? No one's going to believe you, Liam. I've already made sure of that." Her confidence was infuriating, but it only strengthened my resolve. She thought she had the upper hand, but she didn't know how much I'd already uncovered. The messages, the bank statements, the conversations she didn't think I'd hear. It was all there, waiting to be used against her. I just needed the right moment to strike. Over the next few days, I played along, pretending to go about my life as if nothing had changed. But every chance I got, I added to my growing arsenal of evidence. And then, I got the break I was waiting for. While digging through her emails, I found a thread between her and a lawyer she had hired. In it, she admitted to fabricating the text she planned to use against me. "They'll eat this up in court," one email read. "He won't stand a chance." That was all I needed. I called Jason immediately, my voice trembling with both anger and relief. "It's time," I said. "She wanted war? She's about to get it." I hung up the phone with Jason and sat in silence for a moment, staring at the folder of evidence I'd amassed over the weeks. Everything I needed to dismantle Mia's web of lies was right there in front of me. My heart was racing, but this wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. She had declared war, and I was ready to fight back. The next step was clear. I had to expose her before she could carry out the rest of her plan. The first move was subtle. I reached out to a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense professional named Amanda, who specialized in high-conflict divorces. After laying out everything I had, she leaned back in her chair and let out a low whistle. "This isn't just a divorce case," she said. "This is character assassination. If we handle this right, we can turn the tables on her completely." "That's exactly what I want," I replied. "I don't just want to defend myself. I want everyone to see her for who she really is." Amanda nodded, her pen tapping rhythmically against her notepad. "Then we need to move quickly. I'll file a motion to block her divorce claims and present your evidence as a countersuit. But be prepared. This is going to get messy." Messy was an understatement. The next morning, Mia received the papers. I watched from the window as she opened the envelope, her face twisting from confusion to anger. She stormed into the house, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, waving the papers in my face. "It's called the truth," I said calmly. "Something you've been avoiding for a long time." Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty beneath her fury. "You think you're smart, don't you? You think this is going to save you?" "It's not about saving myself," I said, stepping closer. "It's about making sure you can't ruin anyone else the way you tried to ruin me." Her bravado faltered, but she quickly recovered, throwing the papers onto the floor. "You have no idea who you're messing with," she hissed. "I'll destroy you." "You already tried," I shot back. "And you failed." Over the next few days, things escalated rapidly. Mia's lawyer tried to discredit my evidence, but Amanda was relentless, countering every argument with precision. We subpoenaed Mia's financial records, uncovering more evidence of her deceit, including a hidden account she'd been funneling money into for years. When we presented this in court, Mia's expression was a mixture of shock and panic. She hadn't expected me to fight back so effectively. But the real bombshell came when Amanda introduced the email thread I had found. the one where Mia admitted to fabricating the messages she planned to use against me. The courtroom fell silent as the emails were read aloud, each word stripping away her carefully constructed facade. Mia's lawyer tried to object, but the judge wasn't having it. "This is highly incriminating," he said, his tone stern. "Ms. Walker, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Mia stammered, her usual confidence crumbling under the weight of the evidence. This is taken out of context," she tried to argue, but her voice was weak, unconvincing. "Out of context?" I finally spoke, my voice steady but charged with emotion. "You forged evidence to destroy my reputation. You lied to your friends, your lawyer, and this court. How much more context do we need?" The judge raised his hand to silence the room. "That's enough, Mr. Carter." He turned to Mia, his expression cold. "This is a serious offense, Ms. Walker. The court will need to review this further, but I suggest you prepare yourself for the consequences." Mia's face turned pale, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. She had underestimated me, and now she was paying the price. As we left the courtroom, Jason clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You did it, man," he said. "She's done for." "Not yet," I replied. "This isn't over until she's held accountable for everything." In the days that followed, the fallout from the court hearing spread like wildfire. Friends who had turned against me after Mia's video began reaching out, apologizing for believing her lies. Her social media accounts, once filled with adoring comments, became a battlefield of accusations and questions. And then came the ultimate blow. Her employer found out about the financial discrepancies we had uncovered. She was fired on the spot. Mia tried to contact me, leaving voicemails filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. But I didn't respond. I had nothing left to say to her. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. The final blow came when the court ruled in my favor, dismissing all of her claims and granting me a settlement to cover the damage she had caused. As I walked out of the courtroom that day, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I could breathe again. The weight of Mia's betrayal, the lies she had spun, and the chaos she had unleashed on my life, it was all finally starting to lift. But as much as I wanted to feel relief, the scars she left behind were still fresh. Winning in court wasn't the end of the story. The damage she caused ran deeper than anyone could see. When I got home that day, I sat on the couch and stared at the empty living room. The silence was deafening. This house, which once felt warm and alive, now felt hollow, a museum of memories I no longer wanted to visit. Every corner seemed to whisper reminders of the life I thought I had, and the woman I thought I knew. I tried to distract myself, diving into work, spending late nights at the office, and volunteering for every project that came my way. But no matter how busy I stayed, I couldn't escape the nagging questions. How had I let this happen? How had I been so blind? Jason was the first to drag me out of my self-imposed isolation. One evening, he showed up at my door with a six-pack and a determined look on his face. "You can't keep sitting here like this," he said, tossing me a beer. "You won, Liam. You beat her at her own game. Now it's time to start living again." "Living again?" I scoffed, taking a sip. "After everything she did, how am I supposed to just move on? My reputation is still recovering, my friends are still divided, and I don't even know who I am without all this chaos." Jason leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You're more than what she tried to make you, man. You've always been more. It's time you remember that." His words hit me harder than I expected. He was right. I had spent so much time fighting to survive Mia's attacks that I had forgotten who I was outside of her shadow. But figuring that out was easier said than done. In the weeks that followed, I started taking small steps. I reconnected with old friends, the ones Mia had pushed away with her manipulations. Some were hesitant at first, unsure of what to believe after everything that had happened. But as we talked, the walls began to come down. They saw the truth in my words, the exhaustion in my eyes. And slowly, they came back into my life. One evening, I got a message from Sarah, an old colleague I hadn't spoken to in years. "I saw what happened with Mia," she wrote. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." I hesitated before replying. I wasn't sure if I was ready to let someone new into my life, but something about her message felt genuine. We started talking, first through messages, then over coffee. She listened without judgment, her presence a quiet comfort in the storm that still raged inside me. Meanwhile, Mia's life continued to unravel. Her attempt to smear my name had backfired spectacularly. The lies she told had become her prison, isolating her from the very people she once counted on. Sophie, her closest ally, had cut ties after realizing the extent of Mia's deception. Even her family, who had initially sided with her, began to see the truth. One day, I received an email from her. It was long, rambling, and filled with apologies. She admitted to everything: the lies, the manipulations, the fabricated evidence. "I don't know what I was thinking," she wrote. "I was angry, and I wanted to hurt you. But I see now how wrong I was. I hope you can forgive me someday." I read the email twice before closing it without replying. Forgiveness wasn't something I could offer her. Not yet, and maybe not ever. What she had done went beyond a simple mistake. It had been deliberate, calculated. And while I wasn't going to let her actions define me, I also wasn't going to let her back into my life. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. I started seeing a therapist, someone who helped me unpack the years of emotional abuse I had endured. Each session felt like peeling back another layer of the pain Mia had left behind, but with every layer, I felt lighter, stronger, more like myself. By the end of that year, I had started to feel a sense of peace. I found joy in the small things again: morning runs, late-night talks with Jason, quiet evenings spent reading. And then there was Sarah. What began as friendship slowly grew into something more. She didn't try to fix me or erase my past. She simply stood by me, reminding me that there was still goodness in the world. The fallout from Mia's actions would never fully disappear, but it no longer controlled me. I was finally free to live my life on my terms, unburdened by the weight of her lies. And for the first time in years, I felt hope. Hope that I could build something new, something better. Hope that the worst was behind me. It was a fragile hope at first, like a small flame flickering in the wind. But with each passing day, it grew stronger. The chaos Mia had unleashed on my life had been overwhelming, but it had also forced me to confront parts of myself I'd been avoiding for years. I realized how much I had let her control my narrative, my relationships, and even my sense of self-worth. Rebuilding wasn't just about piecing together what she had broken. It was about rediscovering who I was without her shadow looming over me. I threw myself into my work, not as a distraction this time, but as a way to reestablish the part of my life that had always given me purpose. The project I'd taken on, a major campaign for a nonprofit, became a labor of love. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't working to prove something to anyone else. I was doing it because it mattered to me. When the campaign launched and exceeded every expectation, my confidence began to return. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. Jason noticed the change almost immediately. One night over dinner, he raised his beer and grinned. "You're back," he said, clinking his glass against mine. "Back?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," he replied. "The Liam I knew before all this. He's finally back. Took you long enough." We both laughed, but his words stuck with me. Maybe I wasn't fully back, but I was on my way. And for the first time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next disaster to strike. I was moving forward, one step at a time. Then there was Sarah. What began as casual conversations over coffee had turned into long walks, shared dinners, and late-night talks that stretched into the early hours of the morning. She had this quiet strength about her, a way of listening that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. One evening, as we sat on a park bench watching the sunset, I found myself opening up to her in a way I hadn't with anyone else. "I didn't think I'd ever trust anyone again," I admitted, staring at the orange and pink streaks in the sky. "And now?" she asked softly. I turned to her, her face bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. "Now, I think I'm starting to believe in second chances." She smiled, her hand brushing against mine. We didn't say anything else after that, but the silence felt full of understanding, of possibility, of something new beginning. As the months passed, I continued to build a life that felt entirely my own. I took up running again, signing up for a half marathon with Jason, who swore he'd regret it halfway through. I reconnected with old hobbies I'd abandoned: woodworking, photography, even cooking, which had always been more Mia's thing than mine. I discovered that I actually enjoyed the process of creating something from nothing, of seeing the tangible results of my effort. The house, too, began to change. I repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and filled the shelves with books and mementos that reflected who I was now, not who I'd been before. The guest room, once a storage space for Mia's secrets, became a home office where I felt inspired and at peace. Bit by bit, I was reclaiming every part of my life she had tried to take from me. And Mia? She faded into the background. Her attempts to reach out grew less frequent, and eventually, they stopped altogether. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had moved to another city, trying to start over. I didn't feel anger anymore when I thought of her, just a distant sadness for the person she had chosen to become. She wasn't my concern anymore, and I was okay with that. 1 year to the day after the court ruling, I stood on the porch of my house, looking out at the street bathed in golden light. Jason pulled up in his truck, honking the horn and grinning like an idiot. Sarah was in the passenger seat, waving as I came down the steps. "Ready for dinner?" Jason called out. "Starving," I replied, climbing into the back seat. As we drove toward the little Italian restaurant we'd picked, I felt a deep, quiet sense of gratitude. Not just for Jason and Sarah, but for everything. The struggles, the pain, even the betrayals. They had led me here, to a place where I could finally see a future that felt bright and open. That night, as we laughed over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, I realized something important. I wasn't defined by what had happened to me, but by how I had chosen to move forward. Mia had tried to write the ending to my story, but she had failed. This was my life, and for the first time in years, I was truly living it. As I walked Sarah to her car at the end of the night, she turned to me, her eyes soft and full of something I couldn't quite name. "You're different now," she said. "Different how?" I asked, curious. "Lighter," she replied. "Like you finally let go." I thought about her words as I watched her drive away, the tail lights disappearing into the night. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had finally let go. Not just of Mia, but of the anger, the hurt, and the fear that had held me captive for so long. Standing there under the streetlights, I smiled to myself. The worst was behind me, and the best was still to come.